So in the next couple of videos, we will prepare the Raspberry Pi, we will prepare all of the Arduinos, and we will also configure the board. And the only things to configure really are the solder jumper for your GPIO 10 or GPIO 18, adding in the 1220 cell, and any other plugs that you may want to add in for your fan headers. So in this segment, we will modify the Raspberry Pi. The Raspberry Pi needs two things applied to it. The first is, in order for the user to be able to desolder these pins, because our preferred method is just to put it over the top and then to clip the pins here flush with the top, so that when you have a solder sucker, it's a lot easier to get over the area to remove the solder in case you want to remove this and upgrade with the Raspberry Pi later on down the road. Now the other thing that we would want to do, and this is an option, is to remove this USB header. Now you can solder your optional Ethernet adapter here, but if you want the flushest method and more preferred way, according to us, you would want to remove this. And there are two ways of removing this. One is to using a solder sucker and a soldering iron to remove these 4 pins here. And it's the 2 large ones and the 4 smaller ones here. That's what connects the USB header to the USB board. However, what we're going to do, and this is the point of no return, we're going to use some flush cutters to cut the 2 attachments here and here that are structural, that hold the USB header to the board. And then we will rock the header back and forth without lifting up any of the pads, breaking the connections here, and then desoldering the lines underneath. So with that said, we will first lower the height of the pins. Now, again, you can do this 2 ways. You can either cut these pins off, or you can desolder everything here and then only put on the pins that you want. However, for ease of use and ease of installation, we suggest just putting it on here, taking a pair of flush cutters, and the reason why we want them flush is because we're going to use the flush side on the bottom of the board here. Now be careful not to scratch any of the lines. There are some very, very fine traces that go in between these, so you must carefully measure the height here, and then you can either measure this, the height of the PCB, and then cut them off individually, or you can use the board as a guide. Now, in the previous video, we had mentioned that there are, on the silk screen, which is the nice printing on the board, there are circles around ones that you are actually going to solder. But we are going to also to cut off the ones on either side of it. So basically it's going to be all of these up until here, all of these, and then see these 2 right here, we're going to cut on either side of it as well. And this will allow a better area for the solder sucker to come back down if you ever need to desolder it. So we'll start with this one. And before you actually cut it, we suggest using some eye protection, using these flush cutters with these brass pins here. They tend to fly around a lot, so care must be taken to preserve your vision. So we're just going to take the first one and we're going to snip. And that's the first pin. And then we will take the one next to it, we will cut it, and we will take the other side and we'll cut that one as well. And then again, we will use these flush cutters to cut these 3 over here. Now, as you're doing this, you're probably going to get a little nervous because this is the point of no return. This is the point where you can't use the female headers anymore. But the good thing is these boards are cheap. You can buy more Raspberry Pis if you want to for your other projects. You don't necessarily have to use it afterwards. The main purpose of combining these two together is to make the one best board and the thinnest possible way so we can get the timer down. So we'll next attack these ones. And we'll just do this column here. Also, while you're doing this, remember when you're throwing them away, as you can see, I'm laying them on top of this board. Before you even power up any of your boards, you want to make sure that all of those pins are gone and they're not attached anywhere on the board where they might short out the system. So we'll just double check that after we're done completing this. And this is where you also want to have a nice pair of flush cutters. Dull ones, as you can see here, I'm having to wiggle it back and forth a little bit, but a nice sharp pair of flush cutters will allow you to cut these really good. That's also where your eye protection comes in handy, because they do cut off real good, but they also fly across the room very good too. So you might want to do this in an area where not a lot of people are barefoot. So as you can see, we've got all of the pads here and these 2 pads right here cleared out. You're basically like clearing the forest ready for these pins to be soldered. So now that's complete, we're going to just double check to make sure there are no pins anywhere that are stuck that might short out the board. And then this next step is the optional step.